Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Bronze Age collapse, how an unknown catastrophe destroyed 5 civilizations in 50 years. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. Around 1200 BC, within a single human lifetime, 5 of the most powerful civilizations on Earth collapsed simultaneously. Mycenaean Greece fell silent. The Hittite Empire, which had fought Egypt to a standstill at Kadesh, vanished so completely that scholars forgot it had existed until its capital was excavated in the 20th century. The great trading city of Ugarit was burned and never reoccupied. Cyprus collapsed. Egypt survived, but barely, and was never the same power again. This was not a gradual decline. Across the eastern Mediterranean, palace economies that had taken centuries to build were wiped out within decades. The trade networks that connected tin mines in Afghanistan to copper smelters in Cyprus to palace workshops in Greece simply ceased. Bronze Age writing systems disappeared. Populations collapsed. What happened in the 50 years between 1200 and 1150 BC is one of history's most consequential and most debated catastrophes. Drought, earthquakes, invasions, internal rebellions, scholars have proposed them all. The most disturbing possibility is that no single cause was responsible. What destroyed 5 civilizations at once, if none of the usual explanations is enough on its own? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The ocean has a long memory. As the last ice age ended around 12,000 years ago, sea levels worldwide rose by more than 120 meters, enough to drown entire coastal civilizations that may have flourished along shorelines that no longer exist. The continental shelves that now lie submerged beneath shallow coastal seas were once habitable land. River deltas, bays, and estuaries that today lie underwater were once the most attractive real estate on Earth, rich in resources, temperate in climate, and accessible by sea. If ancient peoples built their settlements where resources were most abundant, then much of the archaeological record of early civilization may be sitting on the ocean floor, invisible to conventional excavation. This is not speculation. Marine archaeologists have already found submerged ruins at dozens of locations worldwide, off the coasts of India, Japan, Cuba, and the Mediterranean islands. In some cases, these structures are clearly artificial: stone walls, carved steps, and rectilinear platforms that could not have formed naturally. The academic debate is not whether these structures exist, but what they mean. Were they built by unknown pre-flood cultures, or were they coastal settlements of known civilizations gradually abandoned as waters rose? The answer, in many cases, remains open. What oral traditions add to this picture is equally significant. Cultures living on or near the sea throughout the tropics and subtropics carry remarkably consistent flood narratives, stories of a great inundation that drowned an earlier world. These are not borrowed from one another through colonial contact. They predate European exploration. They appear to be independent memories of a shared catastrophe, the end of the last ice age, when the world coastlines changed forever and entire ways of life were drowned. The civilizations that built on those shores, if they existed, vanished beneath the waves. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns, in science, demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter, the core evidence surrounding the Bronze Age collapse, how an unknown catastrophe destroyed 5 civilizations in 50 years is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The collapse unfolded between approximately 1200 and 1150 BC. Within that 50-year window, the Hittite Empire, which controlled all of Anatolia and had been a dominant superpower for 3 centuries, ceased to exist entirely. Its capital Hadusa was burned and abandoned. Scholars had no knowledge of the Hittites at all until their capital was excavated near modern Bagaskoy, Turkey, beginning in 1906. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen. Instruments malfunction. Researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the city of Ugarit on the Syrian coast was one of the ancient world's great commercial hubs, a multilingual trading center where merchants from Egypt, Canaan, Cyprus, and the Aegean conducted business. Around 1185 BC, it was destroyed by fire and never reoccupied. A letter found baked in a kiln, never sent, described an emergency. Ships were needed immediately, the enemy had arrived, and there was no grain. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this. And that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. Egyptian records from the reign of Ramesses III at Medinet Habu describe massive invasions by coalitions the Egyptians called the Sea Peoples, groups identified in the texts as Peliset, Tjeka, Shekelesh, Denian, and Weshesh. Egypt repelled them in 2 great battles around 1178 BC, but was permanently weakened. The Peliset are believed by many scholars to be the biblical Philistines. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the Palace of Pylos in southwestern Greece burned around 1180 BC. In the hours before destruction, scribes were still inscribing Linear B clay tablets with administrative records, military call-ups, rower assignments, emergency requisitions of bronze from temple tripods. The tablets survived only because the palace fire baked them hard. They are the last words of Mycenaean bureaucracy, preserved by the catastrophe that ended it. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of isoscape analysis of human skeletal remains and paleoclimate studies of lake sediments and speleothems across the eastern Mediterranean confirm a prolonged and severe drought beginning around 1200 BC. Brandon Drake's 2012 study in the Journal of Archaeological Science showed a shift to drier conditions lasting roughly 300 years, affecting grain production across Cyprus, the Levant, and Greece simultaneously. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: Mycenaean palace culture, the civilization of Agamemnon, Odysseus, and Achilles, as preserved in Homeric epic, ended completely around 1150 BC. The palaces at Mycenae, Tiryns, and Pylos were destroyed. The linear B writing system disappeared. Greece entered a centuries-long dark age with sharply reduced population, no monumental architecture, and no writing. The Homeric world was a memory of what had been lost. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Bronze Age collapse, how an unknown catastrophe destroyed 5 civilizations in 50 years. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that Eric Klein of George Washington University argues in his 2014 book, 1177 BC, the year civilization collapsed, that no single cause was responsible. Drought weakened agricultural systems, earthquakes damaged key cities, internal rebellions destabilized palace economies, and sea people's invasions delivered the final blow to already stressed societies. Critics question whether this multicausal model is falsifiable or simply a catalog of every known stress factor. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that Brandon Drake's 2012 climate study presents drought as the primary driver, with social and military disruptions as downstream consequences. A 300-year dry period reduced crop yields, triggered famine, and set populations in motion across the Mediterranean. Opponents note that some collapsed sites show no evidence of famine, and that Egypt, which survived, faced the same climate conditions. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the Sea Peoples migration theory, that displaced populations from the Aegean and Anatolia swept through the Levant and destroyed palace cultures, remains the oldest and most widely known explanation. Egyptian texts give it primary source support, but most modern scholars now view the Sea Peoples as a symptom of collapse rather than its cause, since many of the societies they allegedly destroyed had already stopped functioning. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Bronze Age collapse, how an unknown catastrophe destroyed 5 civilizations in 50 years, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes destruction layers dated to approximately 1200–1150 BC have been identified at dozens of eastern Mediterranean sites including Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos, Hadusa, Ugarit, Megiddo, Lachish, and Enkomi in Cyprus. The synchrony of these destructions across a wide geographic area, confirmed by radiocarbon dating and ceramic sequences, is itself the primary evidence that whatever happened was not local but systemic. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the Ugarit emergency letter found unfired in a kiln, meaning it was being prepared for sending when the city was destroyed, reads, "The enemy's ships came here, my cities were burned, and they did evil things in my country." A second tablet from the same archive requests grain urgently, stating that the situation is a matter of life and death. These documents are the closest thing to eyewitness accounts of the collapse. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed linear B tablets from Pylos, deciphered by Michael Ventris in 1952, show the palace administration in emergency mode in its final weeks. Tablets record the commandeering of bronze from religious tripods to make weapons and the deployment of rowers and watchers to coastal positions. The administrative system continued functioning until the moment the palace burned, suggesting the collapse came from outside rather than from internal failure. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Bronze Age collapse, how an unknown catastrophe destroyed 5 civilizations in 50 years. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Eric Klein's 1177 BC, the year civilization collapsed, brought the Bronze Age collapse to mainstream attention and framed it explicitly as a warning for modern interconnected societies. The parallel is deliberate. A highly globalized trading system, dependent on specialized supply chains and vulnerable to synchronized shocks, collapsed when multiple stresses hit simultaneously. Climate science has moved to the center of Bronze Age research, with paleoclimate data from Lake Kors and cave formations, now providing year-by-year precipitation records for the period. The collapse remains without a single agreed cause, which is itself the lesson. Complex civilizations do not die from one wound. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Bronze Age collapse, how an unknown catastrophe destroyed 5 civilizations in 50 years, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Bronze Age collapse ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle, it is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.